Have you ever gone to bed feeling relatively confident about your blood sugar, only to wake up and see a number that makes your stomach drop? You didn't snack late. You didn't overdo carbohydrates. You followed your plan. And yet, your fasting glucose is 30, sometimes 40 points higher than where you left it. It feels unfair. It feels confusing. And for many people living with diabetes, it feels discouraging. But here's something most people are never told. What happens to your blood sugar while you sleep is heavily influenced by what you do in the 2 hours before you go to bed. Those final evening habits quietly determine whether your liver releases a surge of glucose overnight or whether your body stabilizes and repairs itself properly. Your body does not shut down blood sugar regulation at night. In fact, it becomes more delicate. Hormones shift. Cortisol rises in the early morning hours. Growth hormone pulses. The liver prepares for the next day. For people without diabetes, this process is smooth and balanced. For those with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, that normal overnight rhythm can turn into the dawn phenomenon, a spike in blood sugar that happens between roughly 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., long before you wake up. You can go to sleep with a reading of 120 and wake up at 160 without eating a single bite. The culprit is not always dinner. It is often your evening routine. There is growing research suggesting that small, consistent bedtime habits can significantly improve overnight glucose control. Not complicated protocols, not extreme fasting, not expensive supplements. Simple practices that influence insulin sensitivity, liver output, sleep depth, and stress hormones. When combined, they can move fasting glucose downward over weeks and improve A1C meaningfully over months. I've seen it repeatedly in clinical practice. And the most powerful part is that these habits require less than 30 minutes total. Let's start with the first practice, a strategic protein-based evening snack. Now, this challenges the old advice that you should never eat before bed. For some people, that advice makes sense. But for many individuals with type 2 diabetes, going to bed completely fasted can actually trigger a stronger dawn phenomenon. When your body senses prolonged fasting, especially overnight, the liver responds by releasing stored glucose to protect you from hypoglycemia. In someone with insulin resistance, that release can overshoot. A modest protein snack about 60 to 90 minutes before bed can gently signal to the liver that there is no emergency. There is no need to flood the bloodstream with stored glucose. Protein stimulates a mild insulin response, not the sharp spike that carbohydrates create, but enough to help stabilize liver output. Studies examining bedtime protein intake in people with impaired glucose tolerance have shown lower fasting glucose readings the following morning compared to nights without any intake. The key is the type and amount. Around 25 to 30 grams of protein is sufficient. Examples include a cup of cottage cheese, plain Greek yogurt, 2 hard-boiled eggs, or a small handful of almonds combined with a piece of cheese. Casein protein, found in dairy, digests slowly and provides a steady release of amino acids throughout the night. That slow digestion appears to help blunt excessive early morning glucose release. The goal is not to eat a large meal, it is to provide steady metabolic signaling. This strategy also has longer-term benefits. Protein before bed supports muscle repair overnight. Preserving and building lean muscle mass is one of the most powerful ways to improve insulin sensitivity, because muscle tissue is one of the primary sites for glucose disposal. Over weeks, this practice may contribute to improved morning numbers and better glucose tolerance during the day. Timing matters. Eat the snack at least an hour before lying down to avoid reflux and to allow digestion to begin while you are upright. Now let's move to the second practice, post-dinner movement. This may be the most underrated habit in diabetes management. After dinner, many people settle onto the couch and remain sedentary until bedtime. Meanwhile, glucose from that meal circulates in the bloodstream. The longer it circulates, the more strain it places on blood vessels and nerves. A simple 20-minute walk after dinner can dramatically change that trajectory. When your muscles contract, they activate glucose transporters that pull sugar from the bloodstream, independent of insulin. That means you are lowering post-meal glucose even if insulin sensitivity is reduced. Research consistently shows that light to moderate walking within 30 to 60 minutes after eating reduces postprandial glucose spikes significantly. Over months, consistent post-dinner walks have been associated with meaningful reductions in A1C. The walk does not need to be intense. In fact, steady, comfortable pacing is ideal. You should be able to hold a conversation but feel slightly warm. The goal is consistency. Walking every evening for 20 minutes will outperform an intense workout done once a week. There are additional benefits beyond glucose disposal. Evening movement reduces cortisol levels. Cortisol is a stress hormone that stimulates glucose release from the liver. Lower cortisol in the evening translates to lower overnight glucose production. Walking outdoors also supports circadian rhythm alignment, which improves sleep onset and quality. Better sleep improves insulin sensitivity. These systems are interconnected. Movement improves sleep. Sleep improves glucose regulation. Glucose stability reduces stress. It becomes a positive cycle rather than a destructive one. The third practice is what I call the digital sunset. Modern life has introduced an invisible disruptor of blood sugar control: blue light exposure at night. Screens emit wavelengths that suppress melatonin production. Melatonin is commonly thought of as a sleep hormone, but it also plays a role in insulin regulation and pancreatic function. When you flood your eyes with bright screens until the moment you close them, you delay melatonin release and disrupt circadian signaling. Research shows that inadequate sleep or circadian misalignment reduces insulin sensitivity the next day and increases fasting glucose. Even 2 hours of screen exposure before bed can alter hormonal patterns enough to influence morning numbers. The solution is straightforward, though not always easy. Turn off screens at least 90 minutes before bed. Replace scrolling with reading a physical book under warm lighting, light stretching, journaling, or quiet conversation. If device use is unavoidable, use blue light blocking filters or glasses, but understand that full disengagement is more effective. Protecting that melatonin window protects overnight glucose control. The fourth practice involves optimizing your sleep environment, specifically temperature. Your body needs to lower its core temperature to enter deep sleep. Deep sleep stages are when growth hormone is released and when metabolic repair is most active. Warmer sleeping environments disrupt deep sleep and increase nighttime awakenings. Studies have shown that sleeping in a cooler room, generally around 66 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, improves insulin sensitivity and supports brown fat activation. Brown fat burns glucose to generate heat. When activated during cooler sleep, it can enhance overnight glucose disposal. Cooler sleep also stabilizes heart rate and reduces sympathetic nervous system activation. Fewer awakenings mean fewer stress hormone spikes overnight. Fewer stress hormones mean less hepatic glucose release. The cumulative effect can be noticeable within days. Many people see improvements in fasting glucose within a week of consistently sleeping in a cooler environment. These four practices, strategic protein intake, post-dinner walking, digital sunset, and cool sleep optimization, do not work in isolation. They amplify each other. Protein steadies the liver. Walking clears circulating glucose. Screen restriction improves melatonin. Cool sleep enhances deep repair. Together, they create a metabolic environment that favors stability instead of spikes, and this is just the beginning. In the next section, we will dive deeper into how these habits interact with insulin sensitivity over 30, 60, and 90 days, and I'll share a simple step-by-step framework for implementing all four without overwhelm. Now, let's go deeper, because understanding why these habits work makes it far easier to stay consistent with them. When you understand the mechanism, you stop seeing these practices as nice suggestions and start seeing them as metabolic leverage points. Blood sugar overnight is governed by three major systems: liver glucose output, insulin sensitivity, and stress hormone regulation. Each of the four bedtime habits directly influences one or more of these systems, and when combined, they shift your body from a glucose-releasing state to a glucose-stabilizing state. Let's revisit the strategic protein snack, but this time from a hormonal perspective. During the early morning hours, cortisol naturally rises to prepare your body for waking. Cortisol stimulates gluconeogenesis, which is the production of glucose in the liver. In individuals with insulin resistance, that cortisol-driven glucose release is exaggerated because insulin is not effectively signaling the liver to slow down. A modest amount of protein before bed increases circulating amino acids overnight, which in turn stimulates a mild insulin response and improves the balance between glucagon and insulin. This balance sends a stabilizing message to the liver. It reduces the urgency of overnight glucose release. Over time, this repeated signaling can help retrain hepatic output patterns, meaning your liver becomes less reactive and more stable. There's another overlooked factor. When you go to bed completely fasted, your body sometimes perceives that as stress, especially if you had an early dinner. Stress hormones rise subtly. Even if you are not consciously anxious, your physiology shifts into a mild survival mode. That shift encourages glucose release. Providing steady amino acids reduces that internal stress signal. It gives your metabolism a sense of security, and metabolic security translates to stability. Now consider what happens when you combine that protein snack with a post-dinner walk. After your evening meal, blood glucose rises. If you remain sedentary, your pancreas must produce more insulin to move that glucose into cells. But when you walk, your muscle contractions activate GLUT4 transporters independently of insulin. That means glucose enters muscle cells without requiring as much insulin. You are essentially lowering your insulin demand while simultaneously lowering blood sugar. This has profound implications over time. Lower insulin demand improves insulin sensitivity. Improved insulin sensitivity means your cells respond more efficiently the next day. That means less strain on your pancreas and more predictable fasting numbers. Research on postprandial walking has shown that even 10 to 15 minutes of movement can blunt glucose spikes significantly. But the real power is cumulative. When you walk nightly, your muscles adapt. They increase mitochondrial density. They become more metabolically flexible. They burn glucose and fat more efficiently. Over several weeks, your baseline insulin sensitivity improves. Many people notice that their morning numbers become more consistent, not just lower. Consistency matters because variability in blood sugar is strongly associated with long-term complications. Now let's examine the digital sunset practice through the lens of circadian biology. Your body operates on a roughly 24-hour clock, regulated by the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain. Light exposure is the primary signal that sets this clock. When you expose your eyes to bright blue light late at night, you delay the clock. That delay shifts melatonin release and alters insulin sensitivity rhythms. Studies have shown that circadian misalignment alone, even without changes in diet, can impair glucose tolerance the next day. In controlled laboratory settings, participants exposed to light at night showed reduced insulin sensitivity and elevated fasting glucose compared to those sleeping in darkness. Melatonin receptors exist not only in the brain but also in pancreatic beta cells. When melatonin signaling is disrupted, insulin secretion patterns are altered. This is why poor sleep and late-night screen use often correlate with higher morning readings. The body is not confused, it is responding to mixed signals. When you implement a digital sunset and allow melatonin to rise naturally, you restore proper hormonal sequencing. Cortisol peaks at the correct time. Insulin sensitivity follows its natural curve. Growth hormone is released during deep sleep. These hormonal rhythms influence blood sugar regulation more than many people realize. The final practice, cooling your sleep environment, ties directly into metabolic efficiency. Brown adipose tissue, often called brown fat, becomes more active in cooler conditions. Unlike white fat, which stores energy, brown fat burns energy to generate heat. It consumes glucose in the process. Research using imaging techniques has demonstrated that individuals sleeping in cooler environments show increased brown fat activity and improved insulin sensitivity over time. While the exact degree of glucose disposal varies, the direction is clear. Cooler sleep supports metabolic activation. Additionally, cooler temperatures improve sleep architecture. Deep sleep stages are prolonged. During deep sleep, sympathetic nervous system activity decreases and parasympathetic activity increases. That shift lowers heart rate, reduces blood pressure, and stabilizes glucose production. Frequent nighttime awakenings trigger small stress responses. Each micro-awakening releases catecholamines and cortisol, which can nudge glucose upward. Reducing awakenings reduces those hormonal surges. When you look at these four practices collectively, they create a metabolic cascade. The protein snack stabilizes liver output. The walk lowers circulating glucose and improves insulin sensitivity. The digital sunset restores hormonal timing. The cool room deepens sleep and activates brown fat. The cumulative effect can be significant. Now let's talk about implementation without overwhelm. The mistake many people make is attempting all four habits perfectly on night one. That often leads to burnout. Instead, begin with one. The easiest for most people is the post-dinner walk. Commit to 20 minutes after dinner every night for 7 days. Track your fasting glucose. Notice trends. In week 2, add the digital sunset. Set a specific time, perhaps 8:30 p.m., when all screens go off. Replace that time with reading or stretching. In week 3, incorporate the protein snack if your fasting numbers still trend upward. In week 4, adjust your bedroom temperature. Layering habits builds confidence. As you observe morning numbers gradually trending downward, motivation increases naturally. Many people report seeing fasting glucose decrease by 10 to 20 points within 2 weeks of consistent evening walking alone. Adding sleep optimization compounds the effect. There is another critical element we have not yet discussed: consistency in sleep timing. Going to bed and waking at the same time daily strengthens circadian alignment. Irregular sleep schedules disrupt insulin sensitivity, even if total sleep duration is adequate. Try to maintain a consistent bedtime within a 30-minute window, even on weekends. Your metabolic system thrives on predictability. In the final section, we will discuss realistic expectations over 30, 60, and 90 days, how to adjust if fasting glucose remains stubborn, and how these habits influence A1C results long-term. Because while immediate improvements are motivating, sustained improvements are what protect your health. Now let's talk about what happens when you stay consistent, because the real power of these 4 bedtime habits is not what they do in a single night. It's what they do when repeated for 30, 60, and 90 days. Blood sugar control is not just about isolated readings. It's about trends. It's about reducing variability. It's about lowering average glucose exposure over time. And that's what ultimately moves your A1C. In the first 7 to 10 days of implementing even one of these habits, especially the post-dinner walk, many people begin to see modest changes in fasting glucose. Not dramatic drops, but noticeable shifts. Perhaps instead of waking up at 165, you wake up at 150. Instead of 145, you see 132. These early improvements are largely driven by better post-meal glucose clearance and slightly reduced hepatic glucose output. The liver responds quickly to improved insulin signaling. Muscles respond quickly to consistent contraction. By the end of the first month, something deeper begins to happen. Insulin sensitivity improves at the cellular level. Mitochondria in muscle cells increase in number and efficiency. Cortisol rhythms begin to stabilize due to improved sleep consistency. If you've implemented the digital sunset and cool sleep practices, your deep sleep duration likely increases. More deep sleep means more growth hormone pulses, better tissue repair, and better preservation of lean muscle mass. Muscle mass matters because it is your largest reservoir for glucose disposal. At 60 days, these improvements compound. Morning glucose readings often become more predictable. Variability decreases. Instead of seeing 120 one day and 170 the next without explanation, numbers begin to cluster more tightly. Stability is one of the strongest predictors of long-term success in diabetes management. Reduced variability lowers oxidative stress in blood vessels and decreases the risk of microvascular complications over time. By 90 days, roughly the lifespan of a red blood cell, the impact shows up in your A1C. Even a 0.5% to 1% reduction in A1C significantly lowers the risk of neuropathy, kidney disease, and cardiovascular complications. Many individuals who consistently apply these four habits see reductions within that range, sometimes more when combined with appropriate nutrition and medication management. What makes this particularly powerful is that these improvements come without additional prescriptions or escalating medication doses. Now, let's address a realistic question. What if you implement these habits and your fasting glucose does not budge? First, evaluate consistency. Are you walking every evening or only a few times per week? Are screens truly off 90 minutes before bed, or are you checking messages just for a minute? Is your bedroom actually cool or just slightly less warm? Precision matters. Small inconsistencies create small disruptions. Second, evaluate timing. If you eat dinner very late, say 8:30 or 9 p.m., and then attempt a protein snack at 9:30, you may be overlapping digestion windows. Ideally, dinner should end at least 2 to 3 hours before bed when possible. The protein snack should be modest and not stacked on top of a heavy meal. Third, consider stress. Emotional stress can override even well-designed routines. If you carry unresolved stress into bedtime, cortisol may remain elevated. Incorporating 5 to 10 minutes of slow breathing, journaling, or gratitude practice before bed can lower sympathetic nervous system activity and enhance the benefits of the other habits. There is also an important truth about the dawn phenomenon itself. For some individuals, especially those with longer-standing diabetes, medication timing may need adjustment in coordination with these habits. These lifestyle strategies are powerful, but they are not a replacement for medical guidance when needed. Instead, they create a foundation that makes medical therapy more effective. Let's visualize what an ideal evening might look like when these habits are integrated naturally. You finish dinner around 6:30 or 7 p.m. At 7:30, you go for a 20-minute walk at a steady, comfortable pace. You return home feeling slightly warm, but relaxed. Around 8:30, screens turn off. Lights dim. Perhaps you read a physical book, stretch gently, or talk with family. At 9 you have a small protein snack, cottage cheese, yogurt, or eggs, enough to stabilize overnight metabolism, but not enough to feel heavy. Your bedroom is already set to a cooler temperature. By 10 you're in bed, allowing your body to enter deep sleep in a hormonally aligned state. That is less than 1 hour of deliberate action. Yet it shifts your entire metabolic environment overnight. The beauty of this framework is that it respects your biology. It works with your circadian rhythm rather than against it. It reduces stress signals instead of amplifying them. It uses movement and sleep, two ancient physiological regulators, to support modern metabolic challenges. There's another benefit that often goes unnoticed. These habits improve energy the next day. Better sleep quality enhances focus and mood. Lower morning glucose prevents that sluggish, foggy feeling many people experience upon waking. When you feel better during the day, you are more likely to make supportive food choices. That creates a reinforcing loop. One good night leads to one good morning. One good morning leads to one good day. And repeated good days shift long-term outcomes. If you're wondering where to begin tonight, start simple. If you do nothing else, walk after dinner. That single habit alone has one of the strongest evidence bases for improving glucose control. Once it becomes automatic, layer in screen restriction. Then adjust temperature. Then experiment with the protein snack. Gradual layering prevents overwhelm and builds sustainable change. Remember, the goal is not perfection, it is consistency. Missing one night does not undo progress. What matters is returning to the routine the following evening. Your body responds to patterns, not isolated events. Now I want you to imagine something practical. Imagine checking your fasting glucose after 3 months of consistent bedtime habits and seeing a number that feels steady, predictable, and within target. Imagine your next A1C appointment reflecting those steady mornings. Imagine feeling that you influence those numbers through daily choices rather than reacting to them in frustration. Diabetes management is often framed around restriction, what you cannot eat, what you must avoid. But these bedtime habits are about addition. Adding movement, adding structure, adding sleep quality, adding stability. They empower you to act during a window of time most people overlook. If you've stayed with me to the end, I want you to take one small step tonight. Not all four, just one. Commit to it for 7 days. Track your morning numbers. Observe. Adjust. Then build from there. Managing blood sugar is not only about what you eat at noon. It is about what you do at 9 p.m. The quiet hours before sleep may be the most underused tool in your diabetes toolkit. Small, consistent changes compound into measurable results, and sometimes the most powerful metabolic shifts happen while you are asleep.